The murders of Abby Williams and Libby German, best friends who were murdered in the small town of Delphi, Indiana in 2017. It was a case that remained an unsolved mystery until October 28th, when Richard Allen, a local CBS employee, was arrested for the murders. But many of the details of the case remained a mystery and under court seal until now. And tonight, we take you through, for the very first time, the probable cause affidavit, the allegations and evidence which led investigators to Richard Allen as the man responsible for the Delphi murders.
I'm Vinnie Politan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on Closing Arguments. This is a big night. We have some really significant information to reveal to you. Do not go anywhere. Let's begin. For those of you not familiar with Abby and Libby, these two girls were best friends. It was a day where there was no school. They went for a hike, and they were brutally murdered. That was back in 2017. This became a murder mystery, something that baffled everyone. Investigators couldn't make an arrest. The public scared that there was a killer out there. The families obviously in anguish over all of this, over what happened the day that they went for that hike and never came home. So this year, in October, a man is arrested, and this guy kind of comes out of left field. He's a mystery man, Richard Allen. Where did he come from? Who is he? How is it that they connected him to this murder when through all these years we've spoken about a lot of people who were sort of suspicious, people who, you know, could be obvious potential targets, people who had something in their backgrounds or some connection. But how about this guy? Where did he come from? That's what we're focusing on tonight, because the probable cause affidavit that was used for his arrest has been released. Brand new details tonight. That's what we're focusing on. You ready? Let's begin by bringing in our special guests. With this type of information, we needed to bring in Indianapolis, Indiana tonight, the hosts of the Murder Sheet podcast, Anya Kane, Kevin Greenlee, with us on this really significant night in this case. I'm so glad you were able to make it. I want to go through the probable cause affidavit. There's a few parts that jumped out to me that seem to lead to this arrest, and I would love for you to react and put some context in it and perhaps fill in between the lines for us based upon all the knowledge that you've gained through the years. Let's begin with this part, that an officer apparently interviewed Richard Allen in 2017, and he was on the trail between 13:30 and 15:30, which is 1:30 and 3:30 in the afternoon. Anya, Kevin, your thoughts about this? How is it that they interviewed him to begin with in 2017?
So our reporting indicated that Richard Allen may have actually come forward himself and said, hey, I was on the trails that day. You know, if you want to talk to me, let me know, basically. That he volunteered himself and sort of inserted himself into the case in that sense, you know, just as a witness, and that is how he first came on the radar back in 2017.
This is fascinating, because if he's coming forward and he's the one who ends up getting arrested, to me, Kevin, this is shocking, because you would think that someone would want to remove themselves from the scene. He's putting himself there, coming forward, but he's a man who was there. He's a man who was there. To me, that would put him somewhere on the, you know, pretty close to the top of the list, despite the fact that he volunteered that information.
Yeah, it's certainly very interesting that he came forward allegedly as a witness, but certainly in some other cases we've seen where people who turned out to be the guilty party came forward if only to try to explain away their presence. In other words, maybe a person realizes, oh, somebody may have seen me there, or I may have left some cigarettes or something behind. I need to come up with a way to explain that. I don't know if that's what happened here, but we know that he did come forward and he definitively put himself there on the day of the murders.
To me, this is shocking. Absolutely shocking. Now, he also pinpoints the time, right? What is the significance of that time, 1:30 to 3:30?
Basically, that puts him at the trails during the abduction and murders. Basically, shortly after 2 p.m. is when the girls sort of vanished from the bridge, and the murders would have happened after that. So what he's basically saying is that he was there basically the whole time. Of course, back in 2017, he's not saying he's involved. He's just saying I was around the area at the time. But it seems very significant that he places himself there, and yet this is the first we're hearing of it.
My jaw is dropping tonight. Absolutely. Like, what was your reaction when you learned that he, was interviewed, back in 2017, and he's a man, and he says he was there, and we look at the sketches, and we look at him, and we look at the sketches, and while it's not an exact, duplicate, it's like, hey, kind of in the ballpark.
One of the most shocking things about it is also that not only did he say he was there, he described what he was wearing that day. And his description of his clothes that day matches pretty much exactly what we see in the video of Bridge Guy. So you would think these things would have raised a lot of alarm bells in the minds of investigators. And it's still a bit of a mystery as to why this wasn't followed up more thoroughly back in 2017.
Well, let's put that part of the affidavit up for everyone that you just mentioned. The clothing he told investigators he was wearing matched the clothing of the male in victim two's videos and descriptions provided by 2 different witnesses whose names have been redacted. So the significance of this to me is beyond anything, because my guess is that the killer likely didn't know that there was a video of him that day.
Right. Yeah, we imagine that. And of course, it's kind of capturing this outfit, this kind of blue jacket, these blue jeans. And then what he's, wearing and what he's describing himself as wearing is a very close match to that. And it's just, again, sort of baffling that how did it take so long for us to get here?
Does the affidavit talk about who did the original interview with him?
The affidavit doesn't spell out who exactly did the interview. It also doesn't spell out, it says basically recently somebody was going through and reviewing old notes and files and came across this and realized it should be followed up on. I'd love to know who that was and give them some credit.
Oh, absolute credit for that person, but correct me if I'm wrong, but this is like the biggest case ever, right? Clearly for Delphi in this jurisdiction, oh, yeah. But it's got to be, if it's not the biggest, like top 3 of all time investigations. This isn't the kind of case where a file kind of sits on the end of the desk and collects dust. Like, if you have someone who was there at the time it all happened, how does it take 5 years to take another look at the guy who said he was there, and as we just found out, described what he was wearing, not knowing necessarily that investigators had video of the killer wearing what he described?
Yeah, there needs to be some serious accountability here. The people of the state of Indiana have poured untold numbers of resources into investigating this case. This isn't a situation where there wasn't enough manpower. The investigators pretty much had a free hand to do whatever they needed with whatever they needed. So there needs to be some answers at some point as to how this was overlooked for so many years.
And okay, let's get to the next part of this, because this might be the part that's sort of new. An unspent .40 caliber round between the bodies of victim 1 and victim 2 was forensically determined to have been cycled through Richard Allen's Sig Sauer model P226. Give us some more context about everything we know about this unspent .40 caliber round. Do we know exactly what that means, unspent? Were these children shot?
It actually basically means that the round was ejected from the gun, so the bullet was not shot. They still are not publicly saying how Libby and Abby died, and that's not in this affidavit. But what this indicates with this specific bullet is that it was ejected from the gun and then left, possibly at the crime scene, which is what the prosecution will say. I'm sure the defense will probably try to pick at that, given that it was not necessarily found, within the victims.
Yes,
Right.
I would think that if these children were shot by a bullet, and that bullet could be proven to come from a gun owned by Richard Allen, they would have said that in the affidavit. And they did not say that. They just said there was a shell that was ejected lying between the two bodies, and that they believe it can be traced to his gun.
Okay, so when and how are they tracing this to his gun? Is this back in 2017 or is this more recently? Because if they connected this unspent round back in 2017, then I don't know what to say. Is this more of a recent development?
Yeah, it's more of a recent development. Basically, when they searched his house in October, they were able to sort of, take his gun and test it. And what the laboratory that tested it concluded was that it was, they were able to match it to the ejection markings on bullets from that gun to the one at the scene of the crime. Although they did note in this probable cause affidavit that it is somewhat of a subjective assessment.
So on the one hand, yeah, and I get it, experts can disagree about that, but it gets you closer to all of this. It's, So I wonder if he knew that there was an unspent round that was left at the scene, because they're not testing the gun until like 5 years later.
Right. And what's interesting is that when they ask him that directly in 2022, he does not have an explanation. He does not say, oh, I was there and I was there a few hours earlier maybe than I said, and I ejected a bullet by accident. He doesn't say that I loaned my gun to a buddy. He basically says, I have no idea how that would have gotten there.
And I think it's likely that the reason why we have not heard about that bullet until today goes back to what you were suggesting, that the killer may not have known he left it there. And if the killer knew he left the bullet there, he almost certainly would have gotten rid of the gun at some point in the ensuing 5 years. So it makes sense that the police and the investigators chose to keep that particular fact a secret in this investigation.
Absolutely, and that's a job well done. I just think that job could have been done in 2017, because I don't know if there's any additional evidence that they needed to get the level of probable cause to get that search warrant, right? Because it seems to me that if you go to a judge and you say, here's a guy who admits being at the scene, describes clothing that is similar to the killer's clothing, and was also similar to the clothing that was described by witnesses at the scene seeing a man walk away, that alone might be enough to get you inside the door to gather more evidence back in 2017, right? Because that information they had back then.
Right. And that's why what we're really curious about is what exactly happened. Is there some reasonable explanation for this taking so long, or what happened exactly? That's what we're sort of looking into right now. But we're very curious to know what exactly happened.
And again, they've done a good job in being able to match this evidence, et cetera. But the timing is, I think, the big issue that everyone's talking about tonight. Let's talk about this now. A vehicle matching the descriptions of his Ford Focus is seen around 210, 214, and 228. So what are the details surrounding his vehicle and being at the scene, et cetera?
This has been kind of a big mystery in the case for a while, because basically police reached out to the public saying, if you have any information about a vehicle that was parked at the old abandoned Child Protective Services building, let us know. but they didn't give a make or model or any additional information. So it's always been something that people were wondering, what exactly are they looking for here? And this sort of gives us some more indication. You had different witnesses kind of describing disparate cars. I think one person said they thought it might be a smart car. Another said maybe a purple PT Cruiser. But what investigators say in this affidavit is that they believe that maybe those are not entirely inconsistent with a dark colored Ford Focus, which they say that Allen owned back in 2017.
And was there ever a license plate or anything that was taken or grabbed off of a video anywhere that was ever revealed or revealed in the affidavit?
Well, they say in the affidavit that the vehicle was actually parked in such a way that suggested that the driver was deliberately trying to hide the license plate. In other words, he kind of backed up so the license plate was, facing the building, not facing any cameras.
Wow. This, again, this is shocking information, but you start putting these pieces together, you can understand why this arrest was made. The question is, why now? Was there anything in the affidavit that was like, okay, I get it. This is what just recently happened, and this is why all of a sudden, 5.5 years later, we're making an arrest?
It's a great question. I think that still eludes us somewhat. I think in our previous reporting, what we put out there was that our understanding was that there was no tip, there was no, somebody coming forward with more information, that this was the result of someone associated with the investigation looking back over things and rechecking things. And I mean, it's interesting that they mentioned the tip narrative in the affidavit, because it kind of gives the image of possibly somebody took another look at that and maybe followed up on it. But it really is a big mystery at this point. And we hope that there is some accounting for that at some point, because we really feel that that needs to be explained to the public.
Anya Kane, Kevin Greenlee going to stay with us. The Murder Sheet podcast. After the program tonight, download it, listen to it. You'll get so deep into this story. It's amazing. So please do that, folks. In the meantime, when we come back, we've got more of this affidavit to go through. And we're going to take a look at some of the new information that we've learned as a result of this affidavit. Facts from this scene, some of it very, very troubling.
In 2018, a killer walked the streets of Laredo, Texas.
He took advantage of the vulnerability of this community.
I mean, there was a lot of fear.
Former Border Patrol agent Juan David Ortiz,
accused of killing 4 women.
Ortiz carried out these murders in a cold and callous way.
Now he faces a jury and life in prison if convicted.
The Border Patrol serial killer trial. Live coverage weekday mornings at 9/8 Central on Court TV 800.
Such a small piece of video and audio that was released by investigators in trying to catch the Delphi killer. Small little piece. They have a lot more that they didn't reveal or release to the public. But in the affidavit that was just unsealed, we find out a little bit more about what investigators knew or saw on that phone, on the video from Libby's phone. Listen to this. This I think answers a lot of questions. As the male subject approaches victim 1 and 2, one of the victims mentions gun. One of the victims mentions gun. Think about the terror for those 2 young girls being approached by some stranger who's got a gun. That's how you control 2 victims at once. Let's bring back in our guests from the Murder Sheet podcast, Anya Kane, Kevin Greenlee. We never knew this before, did we?
No, this is the first public reference to a firearm being used in this crime. And as you said, it's just a horrifying thought to think about the fear that these two young girls must have felt seeing a person approaching them, brandishing a gun at that
A lot of people have wondered how one person was able to control two young girls. And as you indicated, this gives us an answer.
And getting back to what we were talking about before, brilliant by law enforcement not to release that part of the video because they had that unspent round that they wanted to match up to a gun. And it turned out, according to investigators, to be Richard Allen's gun. 5 years later, again, we keep coming back to that, but now we understand why such small pieces were revealed, which was absolutely strategic in all of this. To me, though, it does answer a lot of questions, right? Because we were thinking maybe it's more than one person, maybe it's a couple of people. Do they grab one, threaten the other? Exactly what is going on here? And again, let's reiterate this. We now know or believe that a gun was there, but we still don't know or believe, we don't believe that a gun was used to murder these children.
Yeah, that is correct. We don't know exactly how they died. But if a bullet from a gun killed them, and you think that that bullet can be traced to a gun owned by Richard Allen, then that almost certainly would have been mentioned in this affidavit.
Would have been the headline. Would have been the headline.
Would have been the headline.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. More new information that I didn't know before, I believe revealed in this probable cause affidavit. Take a look. Clothes were found in the Deer Creek belonging to victim 1 and victim 2, south of where their bodies were located. There was also a .40 caliber unspent round less than 2 feet away from victim 2's body. So we've talked a lot about the unspent round. Let's talk about the clothes. So what do we believe this reveals about the scene, or what may have happened to Abby and Libby?
It's a great question. I mean, a few kind of disturbing scenarios certainly come to mind. If it's a sexually motivated attack, then that's one thing. If there's a struggle and articles may come off it or something, or people, attempting to flee, Abby and Libby trying to run and possibly losing a shoe in the process. We don't know. It does paint a picture of a scene that's maybe spread out a little bit, where you might have clothes in the creek and the bodies elsewhere. So that's sort of interesting when you think about, was this a person who was able to control them fully, or, did something else happen? But it's certainly it's a horrific image.
And still to this day, the actual scene, Kevin, do we know what it looked like? How much of a description have we gotten?
I think probably the most vivid description came in the probable cause affidavit for the search on Ron Logan's property. And there they described that there was a lot of blood, basically, and there was an awful scene.
Which to me leads to perhaps the use of a knife, if there's a lot of blood. Let's get to another part of the probable cause affidavit. You mentioned blood. Again, disturbing but significant. A witness observed a male subject walking west on the north side of 300 North, away from the Monon High Bridge, advised that the male subject was wearing a blue-colored jacket and blue jeans and was muddy and bloody. She further stated he looked like he had gotten in a fight. I guess if you could describe a little more context to us, the north side of 300 North, what does that mean in relation to where the bodies were found? And do we know any more about the timing of this witness's observations?
I believe the implication is that this witness may have seen Bridge Guy or Richard Allen walking from the murder scene to his vehicle at the CPS building. And it's interesting that in the Logan document, it says that the killer would have gotten a lot of blood on him. And here we have a witness describing a person with a lot of blood on him. So that seems to be consistent with what we've heard before.
And this is from a witness. Let's go back. This isn't a witness who came forward like this year. This is a witness from 2017 who, it seems to me, if you had the video, so you know the clothing, and they're describing someone with similar clothing, muddy and bloody. It's a bloody scene. Investigators know all of this. To me, that's like, for me, that would be like beyond a reasonable doubt type of evidence that, oh yeah, that's the killer. We don't know who he is, but that's the killer.
Right. It's like kind of connecting him to it. And also shows a level of, not necessarily caring about being seen, which is interesting. Like if he's kind of going near a, public and busy roadway covered in blood and mud and looking like he's just been in a fight, I think that speaks to the killer's mindset, possibly about maybe being a bit bold and not worrying about witnesses coming by necessarily.
Now let me ask you this, because this is another question I think a lot of people who live in Indiana are wondering tonight, and probably people at home as well. This happened in 2017. Do we know everything that this man has done for the last 5.5 years? Has there been any indication one way or the other that he's been under surveillance or was on anyone's radar? Are there other unsolved crimes in Indiana that we should be wondering about tonight? Because like this was like you mentioned, that word stuck out to me, bold. This was extremely bold. This doesn't sound like someone who wouldn't think twice about doing it again.
Yeah, it's a question we've gotten a lot. If we think that, if Richard Allen is guilty, could he be responsible for any other crimes? And I think we don't know at this point. I will say we talked to a lot of people who knew him, or at least, knew him to see him around town. And nobody had really any inkling that anything was wrong. He just seemed like a friendly guy. He was able to come across that way to many people throughout town. So it's interesting that, now people are really kind of questioning that now that he's been accused of these heinous crimes. But as for other cases that resemble this, some people have pointed out ones, on the internet kind of speculating. But so far, we've not heard anything at this point to make us think that law enforcement is seriously considering, this one must be connected as well.
I can't imagine what it was in his background that if in fact he's the one who committed this murder, what would make him do it, why he did it. Did he know the girls were going to be there that day? Those are still unanswered questions, right? And because the last time we spoke, weren't we talking about investigators saying there could be someone else involved?
Yes, and that's what's so mysterious about this is that investigators and the Prosecutor McClelland, very much said they did not want to unseal this affidavit because they, felt that the investigation is ongoing. They feel that multiple, parties may be involved, and they didn't want to compromise the investigation. Of course, we've all read the affidavit. Nobody else is mentioned. The way it's described, it could have easily just been one person doing it. So what has us curious is what else is there that investigators are feeling that, maybe there's other actors in this.
All right, final question tonight. Was there anything else that you came across and in this affidavit today that really jumped out to you and made you think or revealed some new information?
I think the official confirmation that there was a gun at the scene, that really hit me hard because, as you said, it really makes me think of what those poor girls went through in the last moments of their life.
Anya Kane, Kevin Greenlee, thank you so much for your time. You're so generous with it. Your insight into this case is amazing, the research you've done. The Murder Sheet podcast, folks, download it. You'll get all the information, digging as deep as you can go into it. We appreciate it, and we'll talk to you again. Thanks so much.